I'm going to have a hard time getting through this, but I need y'all to like and share because I want to talk about a story that came out yesterday in The Guardian, and it's heavy stuff, but we need to hear it. The piece is by Sarah Novich. It came out yesterday. It's called "The U.S. Right is Coming for Disabled People. Here's Why That Threatens Everyone." Okay, I've said from the beginning that what Trump and Musk are doing, and RFK Jr. as well, is eugenics. There is a reason that fascist regimes come for children and disabled people first. Targeting Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, disability, schools, free and reduced lunch, IEPs, disability supports, all of that is focused on children, disabled folks, and especially disabled children, right? Kids who are at the intersection of childhood and disability. This is eugenics. They want children, the disabled, elderly, folks who they consider weak, to suffer and die. I'm sorry, but like that is the reality of what this regime is doing. RFK wanting to do away with flu shots, stopping funding for treatments and diseases. That is meant to kill people. Stopping USAID is going to result in the deaths of millions of children around the world. The New York Times has said as much. But please understand, the eugenics is at play here at home, not just abroad. Fascist regimes always come for the most vulnerable first, disabled folks and little kids. The article opens with how 12 days before Trump took office, Charlie Kirk, in all of his flaccid, fragile, white supremacist, gummy, repellent nonsense, spouted off on his podcast about how there were ASL interpreters at the press briefings for the LA fires. Then another right-wing activist, Christopher Rufo, took his cue on X, calling interpreters wild human gesticulators who turned briefings into a farce. The right-wing theorist and Origins of Woke author Richard Hanania, quote, tweeting Rufo, declared ASL interpretation as absurdity. It really takes a special kind of fragility to be threatened by ASL interpreters. Oh God, okay. I told y'all I was going to have a hard time. Around this time, Elon Musk was skulking around the platform, campaigning to bring back the R word, which he has done in full force now. To those with less knowledge of disability history, these attacks might read as gross, but ultimately toothless. Activists, though, quickly sounded the alarm. This regime would be coming for disabled folks. Sarah Miller, deaf educator, said that she has seen a burgeoning movement against disability accessibility from conservatives with large platforms, including the first Trump regime. When the National Association for the Deaf had to sue to have ASL interpreters at the 2020 COVID briefings. But when looking at the history of the first term of this regime, and currently how diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility, DEIA, is being targeted, it's not hard to see the correlation. Manufacturing cultural outrage to justify policy that would have previously been considered too cruel or damaging is a staple of the far-right playbook. So the far-right is really good at using social media creators to push their ideology, to push their hate. The far right uses social media influencers, podcasters to normalize hate speech, to normalize dehumanizing and oppressing vulnerable people. Eventually, the talking points of social media creators become policy itself. And politicians begin to claim they have a mandate from the people to justify stripping away the rights of the marginalized. That is absolutely what is happening right now. You may not know that all ASL content has been removed from the White House website, and all real-life interpreters have been removed from the White House across multiple federal agencies. Alongside the words diversity and women, the words accessibility and disability have been listed as grounds to flag or reject grant applications. The National Science Foundation must now reject your grant application if you use the word disability or the word accessibility. The DOJ is beginning to rescind key guidance around the Americans with Disabilities Act. Simultaneously, disabled children's rights to education is under fire. On March 20th, Trump signed an executive order to dismantle the Department of Ed. Linda McMahon has fired special education and rehab services employees, even though she previously promised that those departments would not be affected. Right, we all know that they're coming for IDEA, that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that oversees everything from the Special Olympics to providing Braille material for blind Americans, to making sure that a child's needs and services are documented in a legally binding agreement known as an IEP, to make sure that kids' speech, physical, and occupational therapy needs and specialized curriculum needs are met. It also provides for ASL, closed captions interpreters, Braille materials, preferential seating, audiobooks, laptops, note takers, and any other thing disabled children need to get a quality education. Taking away these plans and services means that disabled kids in the classroom will not be meaningfully educated. I'm going to skip down a little bit. Historically, a way a government treats disabled people is an early indicator of social policy intentions. Disabled folks are the proverbial canary in the coal mine. The article is now going to talk about something I've been saying since day one. Leaving disabled people behind is not new in the American political landscape. The U.S. has a history of eradicating the disabled. Eugenics, the pseudoscientific belief that humans should breed for desirable traits and suppress the undesirable ones, rose to popularity in the U.S. and globally during the late 19th century. The first eugenics-based law in the world is from Indiana. It passed in 1907, the act to prevent the procreation of confirmed criminals, idiots, imbeciles, and rapists. It mandated sterilization. It was a forced sterilization project. By the way, the Yahtzees praised this law in their 1934 handbook. Calls from German eugenicists to stamp out what they called life unworthy of life began in the 1920s, way before Hitler came to power. I mean, Germans were eugenicists before that, y'all. But so were Americans. And please, I want to be clear here, that is exactly what this regime is doing, saying that some life is unworthy of life. Definitely unworthy of care, definitely marked for suffering and death. The Germans talked about the burden of maintaining the socially unfit. Does that not sound like repealing SNAP and Medicaid benefits, Social Security disability, educational supports for kids with IEPs? Those are all being framed as a burden on the government to provide equity and care for these people that they deem unfit. Propaganda from 1930s Germany also depicted disabled people useless eaters. Support for euthanasia of disabled people amongst Germans exploded during the 30s and 40s. The Mustache Man had a state program for killing disabled children. Please understand that all of these horrible regimes start with little kids. They start with disabled people. They start with disabled children. The Yahtzee regime killed more than 250,000 disabled people simply because they were disabled. But let's look back to the U.S. Let's remember that forced sterilization of people with disabilities, that case that passed in 1927 with the Supreme Court has never been overturned. There are laws on the books in 31 states and D.C. that allow for the forced sterilization of disabled people. Disabled people in the U.S. are also legally allowed to be denied the minimum wage. The article goes on to call for the necessary activism to support the rights and lives of disabled Americans. There are already many cases working through the courts, filed by the National Association for the Deaf, the ACLU, and Disability Rights and Education Defense Fund. But the most practical thing non-disabled people can do is to stay informed and recognize the power of our voice. Contact your representative, show up at school board meetings, support disabled-led orgs. You shouldn't have to personally know a disabled person to care about disabled issues. If you live long enough, you yourself will experience disability. That's right, being able-bodied is temporary. We have made huge strides in disability rights over the past few decades, but those protections are under attack. If we don't fight back now, it sets a dangerous precedent. Please understand this regime is eugenicist, and it is incumbent upon all of us to advocate for disabled folks, especially disabled children who are being uniquely targeted. I totally agree with this article that the way we treat our disabled folks, that's the canary in the coal mine. The things this regime is doing to our disabled folks, the way they are taking away the supports, the freedoms, the rights of disabled Americans, is further proof of the injustice and immorality of this regime. Please understand, if you are able-bodied, that what they are doing to disabled folks, they will eventually want to do to you. Either because ability is temporary for all of us, or because they will expand those violations to everyone.